Welcome back to Financial Therapy. It's not just about the money. I'm personal financial planner, columnist, and financial therapist Rick Kahler. Research tells us that 90% of all financial decisions are made emotionally, not logically. For nearly 4 decades, I've been helping people make better money decisions. So what makes my financial worldview different from most financial experts? I blend the nuts and bolts of financial advice with the emotions that drive making them. Good money decisions are not just about the money. So let's get started with today's episode. Welcome back to another episode. And I'm kind of excited to introduce a series that we're going to do on a book that recently was released that I co-authored with Debra Kaplan. And it's called Coupleship Inc. From Financial Conflict to Financial Intimacy. I think this is probably a pretty big issue for a lot of people. So Deb, maybe just start off and tell everybody how this book came together, and I'll see if I agree with the version or not.
Hi, Rick. And first of all, what a great opportunity for you and I to talk about the book. And yeah, let's start with how this book came together. If I remember correctly, you and I had a meeting scheduled of which I absolutely forgot because it was on Christmas Day 2 years ago, about a year and a half ago.
Really? We were meeting on Christmas Day?
Yeah. I had approached you and said, I'd love to collaborate. And you and I had this meeting and we talked about, let's talk about what that will be. And we scheduled a meeting that happened to be for Christmas Day. And I completely spaced it out. It was the day of Christmas Eve, I think. And I felt so guilty. We then got back and made it for New Year's Day. And it was on New Year's Day that we talked about, what are you up to? What am I up to? What do you think? What do you got going? And I said, I'm going to write another book on couples. And you said, yeah, like what kind of book? And I said, well, I don't know, couples and a relationship, a romantic relationship, it's more than just that. It's like a business, right? Come together. We don't just come together as a couple. We come together. It's kind of like a business entity. And you said, yeah, I'm doing this white paper for those who are not familiar with what a white paper is, it's a basic beginning of a theory that gets published before the actual theory comes to pass. And you were doing this white paper on internal family systems and money and couples. And we realized that we're coming at a very similar focus from a different perspective. And what a beautiful perspective that we could bring together for couples. And that, as I remember the story, is how this book came to pass. What do you remember?
Pretty much. We just talked about what could we collaborate on, and somehow we came up with a book. And it was a very interesting fit because Deb is a couples therapist and a couples financial therapist. And she's licensed and formally trained in that area. And has spent a lot of time. You were in the pits, right? Was it Chicago Board of Exchange or?
No, the commodity option floor, exchange in New York, in the World Trade Center, back when it existed. And I traded commodity options. I also worked in for different firms on Wall Street in different financial derivatives. And so I have a history of finance, but really came to see what power and money does for people, with people, and how it changes people. And I saw that a lot in the couples I worked with. I saw how they negotiate or not, how they have conflict, and how do they resolve, oftentimes not well, conflicts around money.
So this is a expertise that I don't have, in that I'm not a licensed therapist at all.
You're not a licensed couples therapist, but you do couples therapy every day in your job.
Yeah, by default.
You didn't know it, but you got into it.
And I am an IFS, certified IFS practitioner. And I've been around therapeutic environments and working with therapists and psychologists. And just about every book I've written is with a therapist or a psychologist, except for my first one. So I bring a little bit different perspective. And ironically, when was that? Was that 2022, January 1st of 2022? Did we talk? Yeah, I think so.
Yes.
Must have been.
Yes, correct.
And I think I had just completed training in Intimacy from the Inside Out by Tony Herbine Blank, which is the couples therapy side of IFS.
Oh, I wasn't aware of that. I didn't know the timing of that.
I think that's when I took that. I took their basic training. And I took the basic training. It's no secret to anybody that listens to any podcast I do that I've been doing IFS therapy for myself I'm in my 7th year right now. And I have a little bit of wounding around listening to parents fight.
Mm.
And I, even in facilitating financial help, I write that I had this couple get into this huge fight in my office. And my body was present, but I was somewhere under the desk.
Mm-hmm.
And I would talk about that all the time. Well, I would just dissociate. That's what it was. I was dissociating. I remember the lady saying, I needed an advocate, not a witness.
Oh, interesting.
So I signed up for this training in couples therapy and made this deal with the part of me that is like, no, we are not going to listen to couples fight. And I said, listen, let's do this training. I think it'll be very helpful for me personally. And I'll promise I never will be a couples therapist.
And I think it's such a beautiful, it informs the financial perspective of that expertise that you bring to what you do and what you brought to the book. Because I can bring the clinical, you bring the financial, and that is what couples need. They need both of that. They need the ability to get out of their own way in conflict, to communicate, to understand the parts of themselves that are at odds with each other. And that is where the parts work, the internal family systems, known as IFS, comes in, and the financial numbers aspect of this, which the moment when it came clear we're going to write this book together, I was so ecstatic and remain so today because of what has been produced. I mean, it's really quite amazing.
Yeah. And to that point, so I'm kind of baked in IFS. And when I do financial therapy, which is typically one-on-one, that's the therapeutic modality that I prefer to use as a financial therapist. And Deb is not trained in IFS and was intrigued enough with IFS that we put that into the book as a lens for couples to help view themselves and each other through.
Right.
And we worked very hard on making it approachable.
Very user-friendly.
I wanted to get into the clinical technicalities of it, and I was outvoted 2-1.
Yes, you were.
and the other 2 was Kathleen Christofferson, who is our developmental editor.
Yeah.
So I'll be interested to the feedback that we get around that, because IFS is kind of in a way intuitive. Like a part of me thinks this and a part of me thinks that. When we start to look at our partners, not that as a part of them is showing up.
And even as we all just talk to ourselves, in the everyday life, we'll say in conversation or in our internal narrative, part of me really agrees with this. A part of me doesn't. A part of me wants to go to this vacation and a part of me doesn't. Right. And that's kind of how we self-reference anyway. And so it became very natural and a beautiful frame, a part of the framing of the book to really help couples work through the conflict to achieve what we're hoping is going to be real intimacy and success in communication.
Yeah. And that makes me think of another point. So we wrote the book to couples. It's not a book that we wrote to therapists in how to deal with couples around financial issues. It is written, it's like a do-it-yourself guide for couples. Yeah. So we did try to be clear in what we're saying and not use a lot of jargon. So just from that standpoint, from what I know, I'm thinking there's maybe only one other book out there that may be written to couples on financial therapy.
Which book are you?
I'm thinking of Ed Combs' book.
For through an attachment lens, but it's not really about conflict.
So he comes at it a little differently.
Yeah.
That's somewhat unique. And then I introduce some concepts from Intimacy from the Inside Out as developed by Tony Herbine Blank, which is the couple's application of IFS, which I think 2/3 of it is not necessarily IFS. We talk about, I get the two confused, the conversations.
Mm-hmm. Constructive communication.
Constructive communication, right. And it has some IFIO principles in there, which I think are somewhat simple that Deb uses all the time, which is, okay, when your partner says that, I mean, a lot of couples assume if their partner changes, the problem's over, right? So the
right. As
focus
long
is
as
on
they change.
How can we get them fixed?
Right. How do I get them to agree with me? And how do I get you, therapist, or you, financial planner or financial therapist, to agree with me? You know, couples all come into therapy or they come into your office. And I suspect it's similar in that, you know, we're all the hero of our own story. And we all believe most often that what the perspective we come from which we come is the most accurate. And a third party doesn't always see it that way.
So the IFIO spends their first bit of their training is on helping each couple explore what's going on inside of you when your partner says this. They call it a U-turn. Okay, great. Now what happened, you know, to the other couple now, what's happening inside of you, which is a focus. Let's turn this inward, not outward.
Right.
So we talk a little bit about that. And
but we talk an awful lot, not just about how we communicate, but what we think.
Yeah, exactly.
And our beliefs.
And so the other thing, so I think this is really unique in that it's addressing financial conflict in couples written to the couples. And in addition to that, we introduce the IFS theory. Well, I don't know of any book written that introduces IFS for couples, much less around money.
Mm-hmm.
So I think on several accounts, this is a very groundbreaking book.
It's very groundbreaking. And not to sell the book short, it is truly, or perhaps not to over embellish how helpful we believe, and I believe this book is going to be for couples, that it goes beyond the relational. We dig into the individual and the coupleship, right? Because we have to talk about ourselves and what our beliefs and perspectives and our thoughts. And so what makes this book truly different is that we are bringing the emotional as well as the beliefs and behaviors together. What is the emotional drivers of money and conflict, but also what are our thoughts? And so you and I can maybe talk or laugh about how we came to decide what we would and wouldn't include in this book around cognitive biases.
Oh.
And do you want to pick the story up, or do you prefer not to?
I wonder if we should wait.
Okay, let's wait. That's a good idea. For no reason other than
I would make the rest of this particular podcast on that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'd love to get into it. But, yeah, we'll just hold back. Make sure you tune in for the session on cognitive biases. But yeah, and the one thing that the book doesn't have in it is a lot of nuts and bolts on the money part.
You're
How
saying it does
to-
not.
Does not.
Yeah.
On the budgeting or how to do a budget or how to do this, which there's tons of information
Right.
on how to do the nuts and bolts of the financial part of
Right.
a coupleship. Yeah, a
This
partnership.
is not how to balance your checkbook. This is not how to save per se. It's about why we do what we do and how to get out of those conflict places.
Yeah, because how to do it in a way is the easy part. And I don't want to minimize the logic of good financial decisions or keeping a budget. But for the most part, 80% of all financial problems or where somebody's stuck financially has to do with emotions not needing more knowledge.
Right.
So if we can get the emotions healed, understood, if we can get that part in balance, then the nuts and bolts can come a lot easier.
Truly, truly. And to that point, it also helps to know how to get from point A to B to better understand ourselves and our emotions. And that is, in addition, what we do, because it was important to you and I remember having this conversation. We wanted this to be a very 30,000 foot view generalization, and then also very specific. So the book appeals to those who really want to do the work. And for those who do, we have a lot of exercises that can help couples walk through this. And any couple of any sexual expression, any financial evaluation, any demographic, this book is universal for couples, period. Whoever defines themselves as a couple.
Exactly. So we talk about a lot of this in the first chapter, exploring why it's so hard to talk about money. I mean, I often, when I talk to therapists, I'll talk about, talking about money is harder than talking about sex. And at least that was my experience when I came up through group therapy for many years. And most therapists agree with that.
And as would I. I work.
And I probably should preference that because Deb is a level 3 sexual addiction counselor.
Well, actually, I facilitate a lot of the trainings for many therapists.
Trainer.
I'm a trainer. So I will tell you that I talk about sex with individuals and couples every day on a very, very intimate level. And yet, should that conversation turn to in session to money, you'd think I just threw a grenade in the room, because talking about sex on very detailed levels can be a lot easier than disclosing what one makes or how one spends or how much debt one has or how many credit cards one uses or how many financial secrets is one keeping. And so as a facilitator, trainer, I will tell you that bringing this book into that realm is also incredibly helpful.
And that just always blows me away. And I'm like, why does this still blow me away? Because it was, oh man, about 15 years or more ago that Ted Clontz and I did the first financial therapy intensive or workshop that I know of. It was in 2005. And Ted was a level 3 sexual addiction trained by, is it Carnes?
Patrick Carnes, Dr. Carnes.
Yeah. And so I remember, like maybe on the second day, we had a group of 8 people. And we're walking from the main place back to our cabin. And I remember him saying, you know what? There's more shame in that room than any workshop I have ever conducted. And the workshop was called the Financial Integration Workshop, I think. And I'm like, Ted, you're not including in that your workshops on sexual addiction, of course. And just in the way he does, he said, I said, there's more shame in that room than any workshop I have ever led or any group.
Sure. It's very interesting to add to that when I'm facilitating a training of clinicians around part of the module trainings for the certification, whether one works with compulsivity, addiction, or not. I never know where the wheels come off the bus, so to speak, from the personal perspective, because the clinicians there are working on 2 levels. They're personal as well as they're professional. And we may talk about attachment and shame in the family and trauma. We delve into that in the book as well, trauma and financial trauma. And the wheels are still intact. But when we get to the last day about money in couples, I hold my breath, because if the wheels haven't come off yet, they definitely do the last day. And I can see the dysregulation. I can feel the dysregulation in the room emanating. And it's palpable.
Which dysregulation means they're getting triggered in layman's terms, right?
Exactly. Thank you. Bringing that back down to user language. Yes. Absolutely triggered.
And you know, I've run into this, that in my work in association with therapists, it's so important that a therapist, psychologist, somebody doing counseling does, now I'll use jargon, their own countertransference work. Mm-hmm. And I remember, and so countertransference work is working on your triggers.
Working on what happens, the person who is
the therapist,
the therapist, the clinical, and even the financial, right? So it could be in a financial realm, the financial planner, the financial professional, the financial therapist, the clinical therapist, what comes up for them versus what's coming up for the client.
Yes. And a lot of folks don't realize, and I never did, that so many of these trainings, like the training I went through on working with couples, 50% of it is on what is getting triggered inside of me.
Right. When you were under the desk or in the corner.
Exactly.
Arguing. Yeah.
And so this is so powerful because it can remind people that therapists are humans. And I remember I took a 2-day course in how to do group therapy. And I was the only non-therapist in the group. And the guy starts off by saying, if you want to be successful in this business, and I was just about ecstatic right then that a therapist is talking about their practice as a business, because most therapists don't have that mindset. You have got to do your countertransference work.
Yeah, you got to do your own stuff. You got to
do your own work. And the one area that therapists often, if there's one area they haven't done their own work in, it's money.
Absolutely. When I introduce myself, the beginning of a training, I say, I'm Deb Kaplan, licensed therapist, my specialty expertise with attachment and sex and money. And I self-reference as a trauma therapist. And when we get to the money part, I say, and so I'm kind of giving a spoiler alert to anyone who's going to train with me, but that I say to them, I've lied to you. What I haven't told you is I'm a businesswoman in the practice of therapy.
Ooh, I like that.
Because that's what it is. And therapists historically don't see themselves, clinical professionals don't see themselves as running a business. They don't see it as how it should be really conceptualized as this is how I make a living, or do I want to make a living at this, or what is my intent, and being conscious and intentional about it.
I guess I can underscore that in that today, the average financial therapy client I have is actually an IFS therapist. That's because I don't advertise what I do. And so when I go to a training, ultimately I have several that are like, wow, I need what you have. And it also helps me use the IFS. And typically we spend a lot of time on all of the money scripts and the messages around fees.
Yeah. And we have that's a new word you've just introduced.
What's that? Oh,
New
money
word?
scripts.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. We'll talk about that. Maybe next podcast.
So as the financial professional begins to delve into the emotional world of money for them, and the clinical professional delves into their own stuff, the reader for Coupleship Inc. is going to see and begin to understand that their relationship is not just romantic, it's also a financial relationship.
Oh, and so maybe that's where the term Coupleship Incorporated, Coupleship Inc. came from.
Yes.
This is a business.
Exactly. Do you want to say more about that?
Yeah, because, we don't have a lot of time left in this podcast, but we could take off now into the couples programs, reality shows like Love is Blind, Married at First Sight, The Bachelorette, all of these programs where money is rarely talked about with these couples.
Just does not get brought up.
I mean, like in Love is Blind, they date without seeing each other, and then the proposal is made without seeing each other, and then they get to see each other for the first time, and they are together for 4 weeks and then decide if they're going to go through with the marriage. And so, yes, I have to confess that I watched that. It was my wife's fault. And I'm yelling at the television, why didn't you talk about money before the engagement? I mean,
and to those who are listening, you brought this to my attention and said, hey, have you seen the program? I said, no, I haven't seen the program. Nope. But just recently I have. And it dawned on me, this is the program you were describing to me. And as you and I know, the very core issues that have to be part of that conversation are absolutely non-existent. They're not being had until after the fact.
And it's a huge part of the relationship, right?
Yes, no spoilers here.
We don't want to get one of the top reasons people get divorced.
Correct.
So
why wouldn't it be? Yeah, why wouldn't it be present at the beginning? Now, no spoilers around Love is Blind, but we'll say more about that in some coming pods. But you would hope, and with our book, we hope that more couples do begin to talk about money in the early stages of their relationship.
Totally. Yep. Okay. So we'll leave it there for this podcast, and tune in for our next podcast. We'll see what we talk about. I oftentimes introduce what we're going to talk about and goes in completely different directions, but we will get into money scripts and cognitive biases eventually. So, okay. Take care. We will see you next time.
Bye for now.
Thanks for joining me, Rick Kahler, for another episode of Financial Therapy. It's not just about the money. This is where I combine the nuts and bolts of financial advice with the emotions that drive making them. Remember, every financial behavior, whether it appears illogical to you or others, makes perfect sense when we understand the underlying beliefs, feelings, and thoughts. Sign up for my weekly blog at financialawakenings.com. I hope you'll join me again for our next episode.